The bench press is one of the more technical lifts from the big three lifts, from the squat, bench press and deadlift. And today we'll be going over everything you need to know, from setup to what shoes to wear to everything. Also, the bench press is one of those lifts where lifters like to do it, whether they are powerlifters or not. And I'd say it's more popular amongst normal fitness enthusiasts and gym goers. So let's first start with the setup for the bench press and how to actually get a good setup. So a very common problem with the bench press in commercial gyms is that the bench and the setup is pretty bad, because first of all, you cannot set up the height where you have to set it up. And second, the bench is usually not very good. It's either slippery or it has holes in the middle of the bench press. And for this reason, it would be best, if you are not in a powerlifting gym, to find a bench where the bench is one piece and there are no holes in the middle. And also, you could get one of these bench press pads that will help you, if you put it on the bench, will help you get a bit more grip so you can actually set up better. If you don't have one of these bench pads, you can also use a band, like a super band, and put it across the bench press. And the last thing you have to pay attention to during your setup is the barbell. Normal gyms usually don't have power bars, and they have those hybrid bars where they spin a lot. And that's usually not good for the bench press, because your wrists go up and down like you're not very stable, like you're riding a motorcycle in Thailand. Let's start with the setup. The first thing you have to do is to find your stance. There are three options. You can either put your feet straight forward, you can put your feet at a slight angle and a bit more outside, and you can put your feet very wide and pointed out more. The difference is that if you put your feet like this, you can maybe get a bit more dynamic leg drive, which we'll talk about in a little bit. If you put them out, usually it's for lifters that want to have a static setup from the beginning to the end. For me, my favorite setup is this one, because I can get also into a bigger arch. You should aim to have your ankles slightly below the knees, and when you're arching, you want to have your knees below the top of your hip. When you're setting up your grip, I like to go for a normal grip where you point where the bar sits diagonally in your hand, and you have more pressure in this part of your palm. And what you should focus on is that your wrists are not completely straight, but not also completely cocked back. They should be slightly bent, and the weight of the bar should sit at this part of your palm. The next thing you have to pay attention to when you have your setup is how high you have the hooks. In a commercial gym, there are those bench presses where you have like 3 hooks, and you don't have many options there. What you should aim for is that when you're unracking the bar, you are able to pull it out of the hooks with a slight press and not push it like a half a rep, or even worse, have it so high that you have to unlock your shoulders to pull it out. You should aim for a height that when you come into position, you can slightly press it out and it's clear of the hooks, then you can pull it out and come into position. The IPF standard for the height of the bench should be at around 45 degrees of the ground, so the top of the pad should be at around 45 degrees from the ground. You can measure it with your knee height, maybe, I don't know, if you don't have a ruler or something. Usually in commercial gyms, the benches are either too high or too low. If they are too high, you can still get something out of it if you put some plates on the floor and raise the height of the ground. And in that way, you can come up to 45 centimeters distance again. If it's too low, you're pretty much fucked. The only thing you can do about it is that you buy a bench pad and bring it in the commercial gym. So let's be realistic, just try to find a good gym with a good bench. There are many commercial gyms that are now integrating powerlifting, so it's possible that the commercial gym might also have a competition style bench setup. So pay attention to that when you are choosing your gym. Or if you have a gym, change it. When it comes to shoes, you have 2 options. You could either use some flat type shoe like a deadlift slipper, or you could use a heeled shoe like for squats. The main point of this is that if you want to use squat shoes, is probably if you have bad ankle mobility and you want to bring your feet more close to your head during the bench press. And because you have an elevated heel, you need less ankle mobility for that, and the squat shoes can help you a little bit with that. To be honest, I'm not a very big fan of using squat shoes during the bench press, because if you are competing at an international meet or at any meet, you're not sure about the circumstances there and the setup on the platform. I used to bench press with squat shoes, And I always had problems in competitions where the floor was a bit slippery. If your heels are coming off the ground, you're getting red lighted for that, you could use the squat shoes for that and maybe use like a more constant leg drive so that the feet won't move. But I'm a very big fan of deadlift slippers or flat shoes for the bench press because you can get a little bit more leg driving and you can also build a bigger arch. That's why from now on I'm always using deadlift slippers for bench press. Also using a belt for the bench press. I used to use a belt, but right now, I'm not using it anymore. What the belt is good for giving you some more stability in the core and maybe help you get a little bit more tight, but you're sacrificing a little bit of your arch. So that should be a personal preference. Find whatever is best for you. You could also use the belt if you, for example, your lower back is very tight from deadlifting and squatting, and the belt will help you be a bit more secure. Another thing for my plus size powerlifters, if you use a belt, you could like squish everything up and close up the belt so you have a bit of higher touch point when you're bench pressing. That's like a benefit of having a bit more bacon on you. So you should always use wrist straps for bench press. This will help you have stable wrists when you're pressing. You want to cover half of your palm and half of your wrist. Don't put the wrist straps too low on your wrist because you won't have any support and your wrist will move anyway. You want to have it slightly higher up. You can think about having the middle of the wrist straps above the joint, and in this way you are ensuring that you have stable wrist during the bench press and you won't die. So when I start to bench press, I take my stance, feet straight forward, as close as the bench allows. Then I lay on the bench and I take my grip. The grip you can take could be a close grip, a medium grip, or a wide grip. For most people, a medium grip would be best. A close grip is not as strong as the medium grip and a wide grip, so you should probably be avoiding that for your competition. A good starting point for the bench press grip is to find a position where, when you're at your chest, the forearms are vertical to the floor. So we set up our feet. Let's first take our grip. And then the next step is to learn how to set up an arch. What you want to pay attention to is that you set up on your upper traps and back of neck and not on your mid back, because this will not allow you to build as much pressure as you can. And in this way, you won't be able to get as big of an arch as possible. So once you do, you set up your feet, we take your grip, and then you want to breathe in your chest and retract and depress your shoulders and push the back of your head into the pad. Like this. At this point, you should be pushing with your feet away from you, like a leg extension, and then you should feel some pressure in your upper back and upper glutes. At this point, you breathe in, and then it's time for the lift off. For the lift off, you should aim to pull the bar out and not push it up, so you won't lose your position in the chest. What you want to do is that you breathe in the chest, keep the chest out, and pull the bar out like a pullover. And you should come into this position and bring your butt slowly down on the bench. You should still be holding some pressure in your legs. And from this point, you should push your chest out. Start bringing the bar down with your elbows, like this. So the correct bar path for the bench press would be on the down part, a small diagonal, and on the up part, you should be aiming to press up and back, and not directly up, or even worse, pushing away from you. This is also the bar path that most experienced and best bench pressers use. What you should really pay attention to is that you keep your chest high at all times so that you don't collapse and lose your whole setup. So when we're talking about the competition style bench press, you will have to pause at your chest, and you have two options. You could either do a slight soft touch, where you are touching the bar on your chest, like you're about to touch it on a glass, for example, and you try not to break it. Or you could do a sinking touch, where you let the bar sink in your chest, and then you use a little bit more like dynamic leg drive to push the bar up. When using leg drive, you have also two options. Everything is two options today. You can either use a constant leg drive, where you hold the same leg drive from beginning to the end. I find it the most consistent and the most safe option. You do this by pushing in the direction your feet are showing, like a leg extension like this, and you do it from the beginning of your setup until the end of your set, and you are not letting go so that your chest collapses. Let me show you what it looks like. So you want to start putting pressure on your toes, not on your heels, because if you put pressure on your heels will come up and you are putting leg drive in the wrong direction. You want to put pressure on your toes and put yourself back on the bench like this. Then pull the bar out while holding the pressure, and then lower your butt slowly while using your leg pressure as a resistance, and you're holding the tension as you're going down. Think about that you're putting your butt lightly on the bench. And then while you're going down, you can think about holding that pressure. And then on the way up, you're still holding that pressure and you're pressing. The other option about leg drive is using a dynamic leg drive, where you're holding a slight bit of leg drive when you're setting up so that you can get into a good position. And then while you're pressing, on the press, you are putting like horsepower into the bench. I don't like it very much because it's very inconsistent and your butt can lift off the bench and you might get red lighted for that. So if you're stronger that way but you are not getting a good lifting competition, doesn't make any sense anyway. So let me show you how dynamic leg drive looks like. So again, a little bit less pressure when you're setting up. You're holding like 50% pressure, and when you're at the chest, you push with your leg drives. I almost killed myself there. Let me show you again. You're holding some pressure, you come to the chest, you pause, and then when you're starting to press, you're pushing with your feet like at 100% like this. I'm over exaggerating a little bit so you can see what I mean. And as a bonus tip, I will show you how to change the rack height without too much struggle. You take the bar, you put it under the hook, you lift it up, and then you change the pin. Make sure that the fat part of the pin is on the inside so you can change the pin even if the plates are on the barbell. And that's the easy way to do it. You don't have to use these things. That's how I do it. I learned it from the internet. Thank you for watching. If you want to increase your bench press tomorrow by 30 kilos, drop a like, and I'll see you on the next one.